Thank you again to everybody who's attending for the first time, those of you who have joined us multiple times throughout the course of the week. This is a really special event. It's near and dear to my heart to be able to use a platform that's for marketing, that's for selling, that's for doing what I'm supposed to do every day, and being able to use this for something good as well. We got such good feedback last year from kicking and launching this off. They asked for more diversity of the type of jobs, right? When we were talking through what kind of things we would do differently. And we are so well represented this week, authors, professors, CEOs, CIOs, and back. So it's been, such a journey, awesome. And I couldn't be more thrilled to be joined by Kirsten Bay and MC Powers for our final day. So without further ado, the people that we are here to hear from and who I'm inspired by and really, really honored and happy to introduce, Kirsten Bay and MC Powers. So I'm going to start with Kirsten. How are you? Tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got here. We'll go ahead and kick it off with a bang.
Well, good morning. It's really a pleasure and honor to be here, and thank you for inviting me to do this. I also am just really humbled by all the feedback I have gotten from the comments and through the LinkedIn posts that have been going around. The thing I think to start with as I look at this is I often just go about my day doing my stuff and trying to be as successful as I can be and get through my horrible email box, because we all know how much I hate email. And I forget or don't even realize sometimes the ripple effect that I have in other people's lives. And it's like, it is deeply humbling to me to see that. So thank you everybody for the comments and such that you've all made, because it reminds me why I do this and why it matters so much to me. So it's really cool. So I'm Kirsten Bay. I'm CEO and co-founder of Cysurance. We are a cyber insurance platform that certifies in both security products, cybersecurity products, and service providers of those products. And what we do is we try to create a more enhanced cyber insurance process while highlighting the security protocols that organizations need to have. So this is certainly a now more than ever conversation that we have on a daily basis for people to be better and prepared for the threats that come their way. So I would like to say I'm a serial student. I'm inquisitive, because otherwise it might be a little crazy because I started my life in supply chain analytics and financial analysis and risk management. And so I came into cybersecurity probably 18 years ago now, a long time ago. And the thing about it was this idea of how do we build built-in security models? And these guys came to me and said, let's do that. And I was like, you mean securities? Like, we're in the equity world, right? And they're like, no, security. I'm like, that's cool. What's that? So lo and behold, it was captivating, because the question is, how do we value data for loss? And we all wonder this in our world today in cyber people, because it is our currency now, and data is value. So we, spoiler alert, don't know, but we're getting better. But what it did was it took me into this world where you can be infinitely inquisitive and curious. And so I worked with the government on valuation modeling, and then I started in doing threat intelligence and looking at all the intelligence side, and then network traffic analysis, and brought all of that together to create Cysurance, because I saw these gaps in the market where we could be much better at defining the security risk if we understand the financial impacts. And so that's how we are here today.
That's so awesome. Excited to hear more about the details of how you get there and how you keep up with all of those responsibilities. And Kirsten was in Vegas all week and still agreed to do this. So the generosity of sharing is just so important. I'm glad the LinkedIn was fun chatter. We always find that fun to see everybody interact before these things. MC Powers, I am so excited to introduce you as well. A recent total pivot of your career from Deloitte to unicorns. Excited to hear you tell us a little bit about that as well. And I am happy to report that I finally received your book. So congratulations on officially being an author and launching that, and looking forward to talking more about that as well. But why don't you start off by telling us, how is it that you got to the seat you're in today? Author, business owner.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And to echo, Kirsten, thank you for having me. It is so much fun to be here among like amazing women on screen and off. So really excited to be a part of the conversation. My journey to where I am really, it actually started in 6th grade. Like if I trace back the beginning of like life was very clear with me, you're going to be a writer. And I don't know why this happened, but in 6th grade, I was just sitting at a lunch table. And this group of boys from 7th grade came up and asked me if I would write Valentine's Day cards for their girlfriends. And it came out of nowhere. Like I wasn't writing. I was like, sure. And so I remember sitting down after work with my marker, or after school with my markers. And I just started writing these poems. And the next thing I know, the janitor was like tapping me on the shoulder in the lunchroom saying, hey, you got to go. I'm locking up the school. And so I got lost in it. I absolutely found that magic where you lose time. And so from that minute on, knew I was going to write. And then, from there, I followed my talent, which took me on a little bit of a ride. Started off at journalism school, graduated with that degree, found that profession to be a little narrow in terms of focus for me. So went back postgraduate and got a degree in creative writing, or got postgraduate studies in creative writing. And from there, went into advertising and started as an advertising copywriter. And things just took off for me in advertising. For whatever reason, my brain works in headlines and in, twists of phrases and fun ways to do things. So really quickly kind of climbed up the ranks from, copywriter to associate copywriter to creative director to creative leader. And did that for a number of years, and then sort of shifted from agency world, which is growing a business from the outside, into internal brand world. I stepped into the internal agency world to grow a brand from the inside out, which I found I loved because you get to be way more involved in the strategy of the business and way more attached to the long-term outcomes of the business. And so I found like my writing and the insight that comes with that really like grew in terms of understanding strategy, and that made the creative stronger. And all of that led me to like focusing on the big picture, and the big picture always involves people. And I'm sure we'll talk more about this. Mm-hmm. So as I stepped into leadership, I got really serious about mentoring people and managing teams. And that sort of led me to my final, like we'll call it in-house job at Deloitte, which was creatively leading initiatives for DEI, sustainability, and purpose. And so that really, like when you're living in that every day, you have to be sure that you are aligned with that personally. And so along the course of that, it's like, well, where's my purpose coming into all this? And then I was like, I have more to say, so I'm going to write a book that is aligned with my purpose. So through the course of that, I kind of got a book out there, and then eventually hit the point where it's like, I feel like I've done all I can do here. I now want to take everything I've learned and bet on myself. So in January of 2025, I founded Unicorn Kreative.
That's awesome. And I think all the twists and turns and how we get there and how the decision-making becomes, part of what we end up doing next is the really interesting part. There's some people who have a linear path. They say, I'm going to do this, study this, and the outcome is that their job is in that. And then others, especially in the entrepreneurial field, and more of the creative side as well, it's, sometimes a little bit windy, but that's the exciting part as well. So we were going over some of the questions that people were asking and submitting prior to coming through. And we always have to talk about this. I don't care like what time of day it is, but when women are gathered in a forum, there's always the inevitable question about balance. And I think it's just because innately there's either, motherhood or caretaking or some of these intrinsic, female roles, that we play. But at the same time, even without that, there's some experience of that. So let's knock out the balance one. As busy women who run your business and run your own P&L, you have to have balance in some way, shape, or form. So let's just rip that one off right now. Kirsten, I'll start with you. How do you find balance? Is it harmony? Is it balance? And what do you do to make sure that you're keeping everything, in the right boundaries for that?
Well, you know me, it's a super, super constant struggle.
Exactly. That's why I think your way of explaining it is just going to be really, really powerful. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, so I am like, my calendar is my religion, and it is I'm a religious time blocker, and the reason for that is because I try to be very, very careful about things for myself as much as for anybody else, and trying to stay on top of those items. And so things like balance. So for me, I have my trainer, and this is something that I think, particularly for competitive people, but particularly competitive women. And I was an athlete my whole life, and so that's a big function of who I am, and it helps me dissipate energy and stuff. So it's something I have to be really attuned to, is that this is always the first thing that flies out the window, or I don't know what to do, or I can't plan it, or whatever, and I have to do everything myself. And so I had the benefit, of course, of being a competitive athlete, so I was coached. So I rely heavy on coaches, right? And this is something that I even have, so I struggle with. So I schedule this, and I have my same schedule. And if I was on the West Coast this week, I stay on that schedule. And I had a problem because the gym in Las Vegas doesn't open until 6, but it's on my schedule for 5 because I'm on a different time zone. I'm like, we're gonna figure it out, because like it's on the if on the calendar, it's on the calendar. But to be able to ask for resourcing and help around, I don't have to figure, I'm not an undisciplined person, because I need someone to help me be accountable on that side, so I don't give up on myself. And so I think that there are elements of that where we think that we have to do everything on our own. We don't. And it actually makes you better at who you are when you can identify the things that you can take off of your plate. I need to be held accountable to be home with my family at 7 o'clock to have dinner, if that's what matters, or my workouts, or whatever those things are, and they don't move.
Yeah.
Period. Right. And so it's those two things of making sure that it's as important as that most important client, because you're your most important client, and that you find ways to take it off your plate, so that someone, like, for example, even now I've learned, like on ChatGPT, you can have it set you a weekly planning for meals, for workout schedules, for things that, like, I don't know what to, like, how do I like get better balance in what I'm going to eat when I'm traveling. It can help you with that. And then you print it off and carry it with you. And those are the things I find that help remind you to stay in that flow of balance, and to be held accountable, that you're going to be accountable to yourself as much as to your teams and all the people that you care about so much.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And I think the time blocking thing, you just have to adhere to it as though it's just as law as a client meeting. And I love that. That's like my first nugget of this too, is that you're your most important client. I never thought about it that way, but why wouldn't we reciprocate to ourselves what we give to others, right? That's fantastic. So MC, over to you. We've talked a lot about, overcoming adversity too, right? As we were kind of prepping for the story as well. And you had to face, the corporate to the switch too, and some of the turns that you've taken, but always having kind of that core value system, that kind of propels what you do. So tell us about a time that you can recall, and I've referred to it all week as like butterflies in your tummy, but one of those moments where, there's a little bit of angst or a little hesitation, or maybe a little bit of self-doubt, and you had to approach something and overcome it. And how did you get through that? And what are some of the tools that you've learned along the way?
Yeah, what comes to mind, and it's a little different than butterflies, but early on in my career, I faced a really personal challenge. And I don't think you can really separate personal and professional, because in my opinion, there is no personal life and professional life. There's only life. And we have to kind of live it all, right? So early on in my career, my mom passed away. And I was in advertising, and I was working on McDonald's and working on some really big global accounts. And when I came back from that experience, like, I just could not bring myself to care how many hamburgers or how much beer like the nation was consuming, which really you have to. That was my job. And so I was faced with this like fear, this anxiety of, oh my God, how am I going to do my job when I just suddenly went from loving it to not understanding why it mattered. So what came out of that is this nugget that has carried me through everything, which is make it matter. And so found a way to do that in advertising, just, shifted my focus to the initiatives and the brands that were doing good in the world. Instead of working on McDonald's, I got to shift into working on Ronald McDonald House and helping that, and started to see like how much good can be done through business. It's not all about selling. It really is about sharing and making the world a better place. And so that making it matter, I brought that every step along the way. How do you make leadership matter? How do you make the mentorship matter? And everything that applied to got a little bit better. how do you make what you have to give matter more? And that led me to write a book. And how do you, make your talents matter more? Well, put them on a bigger stage. And that led to starting a company. So the adversity was personal, but the outcome from the professional angle was really profound.
Yes, no, and I think you're absolutely right. It's one Paula that shows up to this to work to, being a niece, being a daughter, being a sister, being an aunt, all those things are, one. So it's important to remember it that way too. And Kirsten, one of the things that I think is just so fascinating that you have in your story, and you shared it with me, and whatever portions of it you're, willing to share with everybody today, but being a serial entrepreneur, as I refer to you on LinkedIn, one of the things that, you have to go out and do is raise capital. That's part of the job, running the business, selling the business, building the product, doing the thing, and finding, the investor or the buy-in, for your idea, concept, and business. And you've done it several times. So tell us a little bit about how that works, what that looks like. What kind of things have you done along the way, to set yourself up to be in the same competitive landscape as, the alternatives to the money that you're seeking to raise? And then, tell us a little bit about playing golf and some of these things that you've taught me along the way that are advantageous as a woman in business. Because I think those lessons have really spoken to me. And I think everybody would love to hear how you got there.
Well, yes, it's, I think, like we talked about, being an athlete for me has always been an advantage, because it's put me in a different sphere of being able to relate to people differently. The thing that, I was thinking about some of these questions as I was coming into this, and the challenge I've had is, I have to always be better, right? And I always want to be the best. And it's not the best woman. I want to be the best, whatever that is, right?
Yes.
And but when we go into these, particularly for women in fundraising, like we all know the stats.
The stats show it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's true. It's very hard to raise money as a female founder. And so there's a lot of doubt that goes into that when you're getting ready to do these things, because it's like, sometimes I'll look at my calendar and see these 3 fundraising calls, and I'm like, it's like, because you have to get like ready to rumble, and
yeah.
So the one thing I will say to get started is, you are enough. Period. And when you show up, be you, because it's enough. And so in my track, so I was very fortunate. It's funny, I majored in English and German literature. So, of course I'd run a cyber insurance company. But I always knew I wanted to be in business. And as you said, I wanted to be a CEO my whole life. And the reason wasn't because I wanted to be a multi-gajillionaire or tell bunches of people what to do, but because I actually thought it would be my best and easiest way to be able to help people do their best, because that's what really mattered to me. For whatever reason, that was my thing. I wanted to do business, but I wanted to be influential in business. And so that was my trajectory. And so I was an early young executive. And so at the beginning, I was super serious all the time. And so for those of you who know me, I can be extremely serious, but I was serious to the point of painful serious. When I started really doing my own thing, and I got out of the corporate area, because I always felt like I had to prove something. I was the youngest executive by 25 years. So I had to work harder, work faster, run faster, do everything faster, better, and overcome major learning curves that people had already had that were 20 years ahead of me. And that created conflict sometimes, but you just go through it. So as I went into these new environments and trying to do these things, what I realized is that I have this slightly impish, silly side that, in just being me and being real with people, my life got so much easier. My professional life actually got much easier. My connections with people got that much easier. And so, when we go in and we deal with VCs, I still try to this is me. And if you're going to invest in my company, you've got to invest in this.
Yes.
And I will run faster, harder, do whatever, be as serious as a person needs to be, but I'm going to be myself, because that's actually pretty okay.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's awesome, Kirsten. Thank you for that. When we were kind of preparing as well, some of the questions that the speakers, were asking me of like, what kind of things do you get as far as feedback? Especially I think in this, Instagram, TikTok, I guess, world of, fitness and like health bars. And I don't think I've seen enough memes about how much protein I'm supposed to be getting in, like I didn't know my life would revolve around email and protein, and that's kind of the life we live now. So that being said, wellness always comes up. What kind of things that we have to do to take care of ourselves, and I think over and beyond is the exercise, or movement, that both of you have shared that you do too. It's kind of those mental push-ups as well. So my question is, what inspires you, and then kind of what do you boomerang back as a result of that? Because I think it's clear, and if fitness is part of that as well, or meditation, please share. But MC, I'll start with you. What kind of things do you add from a health check, spot check, making sure, like, did I do it this week? Did I, take care of myself? What are those, must do's in your week to make sure that you're okay?
You mentioned one of them. Meditation it's a 25-year practice that I've had in place in my life. And certainly it ebbs and flows, but I physically, mentally, and emotionally feel different, can show up more wholly, can stay more steady throughout the entirety of my day, can keep levity, can keep perspective. So that is a huge one for me in the morning. Journaling is a big one. Just helped me keep my mind state, my ideas straight, get the thinking out there. And also in terms of well-being, I always carry with me something that my dad said to me. And he was the CEO of a company. And one time I was going through a hard time trying to figure out wellness. Like, my company expects this of me, but this is like driving me into the ground. And I was having a really hard time because I was young and didn't really have a grounded way to come at that yet. Mm-hmm. And he said, hey, I want you to remember, they hired you. They didn't adopt you. Mm-hmm. And I was like, whoa, it just changed like where overachieving became unhealthy for me. And so whenever I know I'm hitting that line, that's kind of like my calendar, right? That's my non-negotiable. I'm like, okay, back up. And if you got to that line, you're probably needing to take a little more care of yourself than you thought. Mm-hmm. So the other thing for me is yoga and boxing, which are such extremes. But between the two of those, I find an amazing middle ground. Like, I found out as an adult how much I just love to punch things. And it makes me so happy to punch that punching bag, not people, but it really just gets all the stuff out of you. And then you go to yoga and you ground. So there's a real like combination there. So between the mindset of making sure I'm on the right side, and then the movement to make sure I stay pretty, further in on the right side of things is kind of the way I handle it.
I like that polarity of exercise though. Like, that's why I like HIIT classes. It's like quick sprints, bursts, energy, like that definitely motivates me, the ups and downs, for sure. So, and Kirsten, one of the things I was going to ask you about is that, you are very, very disciplined and regimented. It's like I wish I had the discipline that you do. But it doesn't just come easily. Just like you see somebody in the gym, a fitness trainer, and you're like, that's awesome. They always had a day one too, right? Everybody always has a day one. So tell us a little bit about some of the things that you recognized about yourself that you had to intentionally work on, to be in the leadership role you're in today. Because I think a lot of us, we learn things about ourselves. We quite don't know how to, go about, either changing, improving, but still making sure that we maintain who we are, because as you said, it's so important to stay true to yourself. So some of those lessons on how you got there would be awesome.
Well, so as one evolves through a career, so does one's role and how like your role in that role. So what I mean by that is that it was a real learning, and it was actually like a hindsight thing. When I became a CEO, the thing that happened that I figured out pretty quickly was you are no longer an individual contributor. And I had like envy of like people's tasks. I was like, oh, that's such a cool project. I'm like, oh, you can't do that, right? And you can't get in the middle of it. You have to let them do it. And so it's an interesting thing, because when we come up, we always think that it's like, one of those good, better, best things where you get this plus that and then that, right? That's actually not how these roles work. You actually need to take those things off your list and add new things to your list. And so that was one of the big things for me to learn is how to be disciplined around giving support. So because now there's so much more guidance. That's the benefit of being seasoned in my life now. Is I can now have the wisdom and support to be strategic thinking, but I can't do it for people. And it's hard sometimes to let those things go. And so it's like knowing when, at which point in those roles do you remove even a fraction of individual contributorship, so that then the scope starts to move towards the other side. And that's been a big thing for me, especially in a smaller entrepreneurial company, is when do I get to jump back into now my strategic role? Because I've gotten very comfortable and they no longer, not that I don't mind doing work, that's not true, but doing things that only I can do. And that's the question every one of you should be asking yourselves. What is the one thing that I can do so well that nobody else can do? And how do I do more of that every day and work myself out of those other jobs?
Yeah. God, that is such good advice. Like, I totally needed to hear that. Anybody that's on for my company knows exactly what I'm thinking right now. But it's just important to do kind of a spot check, because it's so easy to be like, oh, okay, that's okay. And then the new norm becomes kind of not so manageable if you don't do those spot checks. So that's fantastic advice. So MC, one of the things that we were talking about too that came up kind of thematically was, if we had the opportunity to go back and talk to our younger self, what would be a piece of advice or wisdom that one would impart on, little MC, if you could go back and share a nugget with her?
Yeah, what comes to mind for me is a little bit twofold on that. The first thing sounds kind of trite, which is listen to your mother. But the reason that came up is my mom used to say something to me as a kid, which was, no use being weird if you can't show it. And it used to drive me crazy as a kid, because I'd come, I was this quirky little kid. I was creative and I didn't understand what that meant at the time. So it was just different. And I thought of things different, and I said weird things, and people would make fun of me. So I go home and be like, people were making fun of me. And she'd go, oh, honey, no use being weird if you can't show it. And it kind of felt like she was blowing, what felt important to me off. Mm-hmm. But that was really such good life advice. Like, as I understood that weird is actually creative for me, that's what that means. And I could build an entire successful career around that. It's a lot of like what you talked about a little bit, Kirsten, when you're like, I'm going to be myself, I'm going to be funny and quirky. Like, our quirkiness is our competitive advantage. These very 100%. Unique things that belong only to us, that's something we bring to the table no one else can. Yeah. So regardless of shared experience, how we process it, and what I call like our bedside manner to our career and our bedside manner to our life, that's like, if you can own that. So if I were talking to my younger self and I could say, like, really embrace that and like really get to know yourself better than you think you know yourself. Because we all think we know ourselves really well, but there's always more to mine and there's always more to bring. And so if you can take what those things are and dig into them, you'll never run out of ways to succeed and ways to kind of evolve.
Yep. No, I totally agree. And Kirsten, what about you? If you had the chance to talk to little Kirsten, what would that look like?
There are two things. One is it's a lot of that is but you are enough as you are, and not trying to morph into other things or be other people, but really evolve into who you are. And the other is, no is a complete sentence, right? But like, you don't have to explain why. No, period. End of story. Mm-hmm. Know your boundaries. Know how far you're willing to go. It's like you were saying, MC, about when you have to pull back, because we live in a very hyper competitive culture, and particularly for women, we have to push and push and push, because if 80% is good for one person, 175% has to be our 100%, right? Mm-hmm. And so those are the things that it's not weakness to go, you know what? That's a bridge too far. No. Mm-hmm. And that actually makes you more powerful than you ever imagined you could be. Mm-hmm.
No, totally agree. And for those of you who are on one of the days this week, I know I quoted Kirsten on that no is a complete sentence. I definitely got that from you, and I carry that with me, because it's so just almost instinctive to just carry on with the explanation of why. Right. After saying no, and you're just like nobody needs to understand. It
takes your power away.
Yes, absolutely.
I was just going to say, like, you hold on to your autonomy when you just stop with the boundary, which is so important.
Yes.
And it's hard. It's hard, by the way.
No,
which
it's
is why I
toughie.
tell that's the best way I tell my younger self, and it's going to feel icky and uncomfortable and squishy, and you're gonna just, but you're also stalwart and strong, and
Yes.
it's not okay. It is expected.
Yes, exactly.
There's
Exactly.
difference.
Yes, it's okay to be the CEO on occasion, right? Too.
That's right.
Fantastic. So one of the other things too that was asked a lot in multiple ways is what keeps you going and what inspires you to keep going every day. And we've had such a plethora of answers to these questions, which has just been so awesome. So Kirsten, I'll start with you on this one. So what inspires you to keep going every day? And what keeps you going?
What's funny is we were having this little pre-discussion about this, and it's funny how everyone interprets that question.
Yes.
So as you may have surmised, I'm a relatively energetic, driven individual. So for me, it's like I get up and I'm like, I'm going to crack this thing. I swear I'm going to not stop until. And so what keeps me going is we created a new category in insurance of all things. And so, but to get there, you have to like convince people, and you have to do lots of things to educate people, and it's hard, and people don't buy into it. And so for me, what keeps me going is that's happening now, and so it's like, oh, I see daylight in that crack, and I'm just going to keep whacking away until it's actually full day, full sunlight, right? But and then there are lots of other things, but for me, it is not even this relentless competitiveness. It is knowing it's in there and knowing it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
That's what keeps me going every day.
That's awesome. No, that's awesome. And what about you, MC? What keeps you going every day? What inspires you to keep going every day?
I feel like I'm going to pick up the baton right from where Kirsten left off, because it's a lot of the same. It's like, this notion of potential, like it's an overused buzzword, but if you're really thinking like, can I pull this off? Like what can I do today? Not get away with as in a bad way, but like how much more of myself can I put out there? How much more inspiration can I bring to my team? What can we pull off that we didn't think we could? Mm-hmm. There's just like, there's something so, I don't love the word addictive, but something so addictive about that. Just because the minute you hit one target you didn't think you'd hit, well, all bets are off. What's the next one? What's the next one? So it's really like, what more can I, how more can I surprise myself? How more can I surprise the world? What can I pull off that, just what can I pull off? How can I do it?
No, I think that's awesome. Absolutely. Hustle mode. So one of the other things that, I was kind of thinking through as both of you were sharing is that, each of you guys has different moments throughout your career, but also, things that you've been proud of that might be personal or professional or the morph of both. So next question, MC, I'll boomerang back to you on this one is looking back on your career, what is something that you can say I'm so proud of, very recently, years ago? What's something that you look back on and go, man, that was an important moment. I'm proud of myself for that.
What comes to mind to me is actually like my ability to remain optimistic. Throughout my career, people are always like, I get this question a lot. And it used to make me like kind of edgy. They'd be like, people would say like, what are you so happy about? Or why are you so happy? And it was like, well, why aren't you? Like, why is that an accusation, right? And so to be in a very male-dominated business, which advertising, coming up the ranks of advertising, we had something called the 3% Club. And that, have you heard of that?
No, I in our prep, yes, but.
Oh yeah. So what that refers to is out of all the creative directors in advertising, only 3% were women. Now, that's such a wacky statistic because I believe it was like close to 90% of the buying power in the country came through the moms and the women. Yeah. And yet only 3% of the voice of the selling power came from the women. So one thing I'm very proud to, like I said, I remain very optimistic and I made it into that club. And that was a very proud thing. And then that has since turned into a movement. And there are women helping women in the industry. And the number has grown significantly. It's well into double digits now, which I think is something that like every woman should be proud of. That's an amazing thing, the sisterhood and the helping one another. And, yes, it's good for us, but it's also good for business. It's just a smart way to build a healthier economy. So I'm proud to have been a part of the forerunning of that.
That's awesome. No, and I think that's true too. The only thing sometimes, folks think that these conversations are emotionally driven, the numbers speak for themselves. It's not something that's just emotionally charged, and it is nice to see progress when those data points begin to tick in the right direction. Completely agree. And then Kirsten, I'll ask the same question of you.
Well, I don't know. It's an interesting question for me because it runs the gamut. But I guess there it's a moment, right, that I had, and I was probably like halfway into my career at this point, but I was working in threat intelligence and doing a lot of work with supporting our organization to try and be like net new acquisition. But what we discovered was we just have to save our current customers. Like that's the most important thing. And so we had this one who was a very challenging individual. He really despised our company, hated how much we were being paid. But we started to turn around. I spent a lot of time with him and tried to figure out like why, what is it that we're not doing for you? Because he was like you said, it's the ultimate consumer of our product. Why is our product not resonating with this person? So fast forward, we had a situation. We were going to this event that we were holding, and I was with his boss, and his boss was on the phone, and he handed me his other phone, and it said, I have this from this person. It said, I have to fly to deal with an end-of-life decision for my sister who's had a massive heart attack. Please tell Kirsten I'm so sorry I can't be there, but I'll catch up with her later. And I was like, why am I even in the same sentence? Like, why is this something that even is together in this concept? And what I realized was that I was helping him be better. And that was a value. And so I was valued. And it gave me a whole different view of how I can bring value to every single person with whom I work. And yeah, we're supposed to sell things to people, but actually sitting down and really thinking about how do I help you be better in your role, and that's why you value what I do, was it literally was a completely mind-shifting moment. And I think about this probably almost every day when I sit with people and I try to think about how do we fix or do whatever or sell you something or whatever. It is, how do I help you be stronger and better and more successful by providing you what I have in a genuine and real way. And it makes my life a lot easier to do my job because I actually believe that we can do that for people.
Yep. No, I think that's beautiful. And it's almost like you got the validation that what you were really seeking to do in being a CEO was actually, beginning to start, or as a leader, was definitely budding. One of the things that, that also comes to mind, in thinking through just women in leadership roles as well is, again, data driven. It's undeniable. There were fewer seats at the table, and that exponentially gets, actually probably toggles up and down, if we're honest, annually. There is progress, and there is, there are more seats at the table, I think, each year a little bit more because of discussions like this and women like us who know that 175% is the 80% equivalent, and just accept it and do it and move on and succeed. But there's a lot of people that have questions or are afraid, to ask, especially in corporate settings. And even though we have startups, they're more sophisticated now. They do have kind of a little bit of an org structure. So what's some advice that you would give to a young professional, aiming to reach high, and how would you advise them to either, speak on behalf of themselves to their, to their boss, maybe speak with a colleague, maybe go to HR, but how would you help somebody today kind of plan their career trajectory? Some practical tips for that, because you both sat in those seats at different times too. So MC, I'll start with you.
Yeah, two things I think really helped me through my career with these moments. And one is the understanding that you can be candid and kind at the same time. You don't, usually what leads you to those situations is frustration. There's something that's not working right. Hey, I got to give feedback or get that sort of thing. So there can be an edge in a conversation like that. There can be a defensiveness. And if you can just step out of the emotionality of that, and this is a message that needs to be delivered, and realize you're talking to a human no matter what their title is. It's another human being that is probably also uncomfortable or in some sort of an emotional state. So to be clear and candid is a form of respect, and to be kind is a form of delivery. So I think those two things working together create really productive conversations. And I also would say, I think it's really great to ask questions before you make statements. Like there's that whole adage, seek first to understand and then be understood. So trying to, so I'm feeling like this. Do you feel like I'm the only one? I'm feeling like maybe I'm underpaid. Do you think other people in the company are feeling like that? Whatever that subject matter is, start a conversation in a disarming way, not a like take to arms sort of a way. It helps you understand. It takes the conversation to a deeper level because two people aren't butting heads on a point. They're trying to understand one another. So I think questions are a really great way. And then it's not, the kindness and candor, that's a, as my husband says, does easy, does hard. It's not easy. It's something it's a muscle that you got to kind of build, but it is worth its weight in gold. If you can do that, it's very important to show up and be willing to take space. And when you get that space, to not waste it with like anger and emotion and things that are going to throw conversations and careers off track.
Yeah, no, and I think that those are ways to, to kind of face things if you've been, maybe unfairly overlooked, or perhaps somebody making a decision didn't have all the facts about your contributions. I think, kind and candid is a very good way to approach it. And Kirsten, I'll turn to you. What are some proactive ways to make sure that you're advocating for yourself, or the right people are seeing you, to kind of prepare for, your own succession planning, but ascension planning rather, as you're rising the ranks? Do you have any practical advice?
Yeah, we live in a very interesting time.
Yeah.
In terms of, there are new agent bots and like all of these new things happening, and there creates some insecurity. There's insecurity like from entry-level people up to people like me, and the reason, and then maybe these social changes that have taken place just with generational changes and other things. And so part of it is having much more open and collaborative conversations around, you have people are like, well, when I started, I worked 140 million hours a week and I managed to spin the earth backwards at a time of the day. And I don't know what's wrong with you. And so it's like, and it sounds so ridiculous. But the fact is everyone has to work hard to make it. And that's life, right? But the other part of it is, I think having very collaborative conversations about how are things evolving and changing? How do we learn more from our young people so that they can learn from us, and that we can also evolve. And that's, I think, the thing that I think about a lot. I was having a conversation this morning about marketing, and I'm like, we need to have younger voices in this conversation so that we get to the people in the way, like the millennial generation is a large generation. I'm in a gap set, a little sandwich generation. No one's listening to us, the Gen Xers, because there are hardly any of us. Right? And so the way we do things, the way we're going to do things, like the millennials are now big time consumers, business consumers, consumers. And so being able to, I think, to really think about collaboratively with all of our colleagues, these are colleagues, they're not our employees, to help them, then that shift will start and we'll all evolve together. And I think that's the opportunity in this new time that we live in.
Yes, no, I think that's so true. It's like 5 generations in the workplace, but at the same time, the youngest generations are starting companies that are very successful, and getting investments from folks in a couple generations down the road as well.
It's also another form of
and the internet.
I was going to say it's another form of inclusivity. Like it's inclusive, just like we want female perspective in there, all perspective.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It doesn't have to have been on the earth a certain amount of years to be valuable perspectives, right?
Right. Well, and I think your buyer example is spot on too. I have a couple of friends who were in the buying position, and they were gay males, so maybe they fit the demographic, but they would always say it's insane. They always turn down women. And I'm supposed to buy for formal wear. He's like, I don't understand why I can't like bring somebody on. I mean, it was truly a thing, that buyers would be men because of the negotiations, overseas, or however the supply chain, logistics would come to pass. So there would be this kind of duality, but it's just very interesting, to hear you actually share that. And I've watched, that be asked along the way, MC. So one of the things, that I always am curious about, this is maybe a Paula question, but it's because I do appear to many people, confident. She's not afraid of the, camera, put presentations together. You can count on me. but gosh, there's so much work that goes into that and preparing for that, and self-doubt. It's like, well, I mean, it makes sense in my head, but is the client going to understand it this way? Or if I deliver it like this, is that going to be too harsh? Or did I read the room right? Like, last time I was in that meeting. And there's these little self-doubts on the things that I'm actually most brilliant at. And it blows my mind that I have to remind myself, like, no, Polly, you always read the room. Like, you do understand what's happening. You know what that client wants. So my question to both of you is, how do you overcome self-doubt? Because invariably at some point in the day, in some way, shape, or form, or throughout the course of a project, we have those moments where like, I don't know, like maybe this isn't right, or some hesitation. So Kirsten, I'll start with you. How do you overcome self-doubt?
Well, you mentioned my golf career earlier.
Your golf career, I love it.
I'm an avid golfer. Why do I raise it in this particular conversation? Because people who love golf have tremendous self-loathing and dealt themselves all the time. And you can't golf unless you have that as it's not a bug, it's a feature. and so it's difficult because it's like, but it's putting yourself in a position where you have to do those things all the time, and you're going to hit a bad shot. But you keep at it, and you and remind yourself the reason why things go awry is because you don't commit to the shot. You don't commit to, I know how to read the room. And then people know it, they sense it. They sense that there is something off, because, and it's the same thing. It's like whatever, if it's a sport or whatever, you step into it and you just commit to it. And sometimes it's going to go a little errant, but most of the time, that's when everything's right, because that's when you're being authentic.
Yep. No, totally. Absolutely. 100%. Golf is such a great analogy for this.
Golf is life.
Yes, golf is life. Meditation for fun. I love it. Your golf career. Well, I'll be sure to look for you, for your addition on LinkedIn.
On the PGA.
Yeah, on the PGA, exactly. No, I love that. Love that. So in this project in saying yes, and we're coming to the top of the hour, so I wanted to remind the audience, there's been so much great conversation and chatter throughout the course of this discussion. Feel free to ask any questions. We are coming to the top of the hour. You can use the Q&A or ask them directly in the chat. What I wanted to come to you guys to and kind of, think through is some of the things that we have to, tell ourselves in the overcoming self-doubt also lead to, new ways and new habits and things that we instill, like, maybe annual rituals, or must take a trip, or must play golf X amount of times, right? So MC, I'm going to ask you, how do you overcome self-doubt? And then what are some of the lessons that you've learned as a result of that?
Yeah, I think my answer is going to sound counterintuitive to begin with, but the first thing I do with self-doubt is I listen. Like, what's in there, right? Is it fear, or is there something to be learned? Have I missed something? Am I overlooking something? And even if the only thing I come to is, yeah, this is all just like insecurity, then I have an opportunity to dismantle insecurity. So I try not to shove it aside, because it only grows and it only comes back with a different mask on in the next project, or a different this on. So like, I like to befriend, there's what's that saying? Learn from your mentors and your tormentors. Like, I like to kind of stop and befriend and say, where you come from, MC, with this? And if it needs to be dialed down, I'll do the work, whether that's meditation or whatever it is, to dial it down. Or like Kirsten said, push through. I'm going to let you sit there, but I'm going to show you that you're wrong, right? Because I'm going to succeed. But I think it's treated as an enemy when it can be a frenemy.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's absolutely true. And Kirsten, of the ways that you've overcome, what are some of the tools that you do to kind of prepare? Is there do you have a fight song that you come into in the morning? Is it something that you listen to? What is it that kind of pumps you up and motivates you for a day?
I was reading something the other day that in motivating yourself, because sometimes I wake up in the morning, I'm like, oh, I'm tired. I don't want to give up. I just don't want to get up. I don't want to give up, but I want to get up, right? But the thing is, you just need to do it. And so I was reading this thing that when one feels like procrastinating, it is do it now. Just do it now. And it really does help kind of focus, where it's like, but you have to, when you're trying to drifting, it's like, do it now. And it helps just kind of restart the engine a little bit. And also I think what what MC said about the self-doubt thing and giving it its space is, there is this thing of, it's part of you, right? And so it also is really giving it its voice. It keeps coming back because you're not listening to a part of you. And so that's the other thing, is it pushing through? Yes, but pushing through with the internal, I hear you. I'm giving you your space to also feel that way, just like we do with everyone around us who we love and care for. Someone said to me once, no one likes anyone who's really mean to them. So why are you mean to you? Don't be mean to you, right?
Yes. No, I think that's so true, and acknowledge it, that it's real and something needs to be done with it too. I think that's spot on. And often, the case is either, external too, like maybe some movement, or maybe, somebody said that she went on hikes, or mandatory silence. But I think all of those tactics are really to get to the end goal that you guys just mentioned, which is to listen to it, to really give it time to fester and reveal something to you. So we are close to the top of the hour. My last and final question that I'd like to ask, of you two, and thank you so much,